Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. And hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 3, the Family of Imran, from verses 78 to 83. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge to God from the accursed devil. In the name of God, the merciful, the gracious. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وإن منهم لفريقا يلون ألسنتهم بالكتاب لتحسبوه من الكتاب وما هو من الكتاب ويقولون هو من عند الله وما هو من عند الله ويقولون على الله الكذب وهم يعلمون. And among them are those who twist the scripture with their tongues, that you may think it is from the scripture when it is not from the scripture. And they say, it is from God when it is not from God. They tell lies and attribute them to God knowingly. ما كان لبشر أن يؤتيه الله الكتاب والحكم والنبوة ثم يقول للناس كونوا عبادا لي من دون الله ولكن كونوا ربانيين بما كنتم تعلمون الكتاب وبما كنتم تدرسون. No person to whom God has given the scripture and wisdom and prophethood would ever say to the people, be my servants rather than God's. Rather be people of the Lord, according to the scripture you teach and the teachings you learn. لا يأمركم أن تتخذوا الملائكة والنبيين أربابا أيأمركم بالكفر بعد إذ أنتم مسلمون. Nor would he command you to take the angels and the prophets as lords. Would he command you to infidelity after you have submitted? وإذ أخذ الله ميثاق النبيين لما آتيتكم من كتاب وحكمة ثم جاءكم رسول مصدق لما معكم لتؤمنن به ولتنصرنه قال أأقررتم وأخذتم على ذلكم إصري قالوا أقررنا قال فاشهدوا وأنا معكم من الشاهدين. God received the covenant of the prophets. Inasmuch as I have given you of scripture and wisdom, should a messenger come to you verifying what you have, you shall believe in him and support him. He said, do you affirm my covenant and take it upon yourselves? They said, we affirm it. He said, then bear witness, and I am with you among the witnesses. فَمَنْ تَوَلَّ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Whoever turns away after that, these are the deceitful. أفغير دين الله يبغون وله أسلم من في السماوات والأرض طوعا وكرها وإليه يرجعون. Do they desire other than the religion of God when to him has submitted everything in the heavens and the earth, willingly or unwillingly, and to him they will be returned. صدق الله العظيم. God the Great said the truth. Now these verses are very important for us to understand what is being presented to us from all the other sects and all the other people who preach about God. God is telling us about a crime that people usually do, especially people who have been receiving the book or have received the book, the scripture before us. They start to twist their tongues and they twist certain things, and then they say that it's from God. They make it almost sound like it's the book speaking or the scripture speaking, and then again they attribute it to God for whatever reasons that they want to do. Some people do it for political subversion. Some people do it for power. Some other people do it for wealth, just money, just selling whatever they're saying that it's from God when it's not from God. But the interesting part is that we do see this often, even with some individuals that claim that they follow the blessed Prophet Muhammad and they follow this Quran, yet they have these external books and external narrations where they even say that it's holy narrations in regards to where it's God is speaking outside of the Quran, and it's revelation that they attribute that the Prophet allegedly said, and yet we find it contradicting the Quran, or it's not from the Quran. But the interesting part is those that truly started to narrate such things where the Prophet never said so, they know that they're saying lies because they are having to come up with these lies. This is also present in the Christian religion when it comes down to Paul some people say that he's an apostle. I say that he's an apostate. Paul the apostate, he wrote letters and claiming that Jesus is saying such things and that the God is saying such things, but yet he knows that he's lying. He's saying things and attributing things to God when it's not true, and he's making it sound like it's scripture. And now it literally became scripture to certain sects, just like as the other earlier narrations that they claim as holy narrations, that also came from God when it isn't. And God is telling us that it's very clear that nowhere ever did God make a covenant with the humans that he did give them the prophethood, he did give them a book, he did give them wisdom, for them to go out and start to say that people should serve them or worship them. So, to take them as lords, which is in the next verse as well. The prophets are never going to order you to take anyone as a lord other than God himself. And again, when we spoke about the topic of what a lord is, the Lord is an entity that is dictating your reality. He's your master where there is no refutation, there is no denying what he says, and you have to accept it without any form of even disapproval. That's the difference between listening to a teacher where you can have a back and forth and it's not necessary for you to agree with everything that they're presenting to you, and a Lord where they cannot be refuted, they cannot be expressed and exposed in a way for them to be inaccurate or wrong. Now, unfortunately, within the Christian religion and certain sects of mainstream, what they call themselves Muslims, they have taken some prophets as lords. They have taken them as the dictator of reality, whether he did say anything that they are attributing to him or he didn't say them. They still don't take him as a human being. Now, God is saying here very clearly that we are supposed to be people who are studying the scripture. We are people of the Lord. So we are people who need to live how this book is teaching us and to teach the book as the book is teaching us. Because you see, it says here very clearly that we are supposed to teach what we are learning. The scripture you teach. So there are some of us that are teachers. There are some of us that have read this book plenty, studied this book, understood this book, and understand what the reality that is in front of us, and we are there to teach. That is a difference between somebody who is in a position of a messenger and a prophet and somebody who's just a teacher. The teacher should be able to recognize the truth of what God is saying in the book, while the prophet and the messengers are the ones who are revealing the book or coming with a message from God for people to understand what needs to be done. Because even as there are teachers of the Quran, you're going to find that there are some differences in interpretation, some differences in application, and differences in how they would judge certain situations and events. But this is why the messengers are very important for God to send. Because these messengers, when the situation is a little very deep, complex, or old, where people are not capable of actually meeting the common ground, and they even go as far as going as each other's necks because of these differences in interpretation or application, a messenger is sent so that he would judge between the people on what is the best approach from what God has taught that messenger, or whatever God has revealed to that messenger, or whatever God has bestowed upon that messenger. And whoever obeys the messenger, then they have truly won. Now we see here, after God is saying that you are not going to be ordered to take the angels as lords or the people as lords, because that is pushing you into disbelief. God is telling us that he is going to send messengers after the blessed prophet. God is saying here clearly that he took the covenant from all the prophets. That would be inclusive to the blessed prophet Muhammad. That after the prophet, God is going to send a messenger to confirm what the prophet has said. So anytime a messenger has come and he confirmed what the prophet has said, we as the people of the prophet, in our case Prophet Muhammad, we have to support that messenger, because that's the covenant that God took with my messenger. Now, there is a very deep topic in the Quran that some verses show you about something called the collective and the singular. So if you are part of a country, that country is considered a collective. So you as an individual, you represent the country that you're from. Let's assume that that country is France. So you are now a representative of France. If you are a person who's patriotic, if you do want to align to that collective, and France as a whole, which is called France, will include all these individuals. This is something that we see with the name Israel. Israel was an individual that turned into a collective. Those individuals that say that I am Israel, they are part of that small collective. Now, the prophets themselves are a collective if they have a following. So there is a verse in the Quran when God says, O prophet, when you all When now he was talking singular, O prophet, and then he is discussing plural, when you all divorce your wives. So whoever is part of the collective of the prophet, we would be that part of covenant that the prophet took, and it's up for us to fulfill. So God is saying that he is going to send the prophets, and after the prophets there's always a messenger to confirm what the prophet said. In other verses it shows that there's multiple messengers that come to confirm what the prophet has sent and to warn the people of what they need to be warned. And then God says that whoever turns away after that from that covenant, from them accepting that if a messenger is sent that they have to support them, then they are the deceitful. So when the prophet passes away and a messenger comes, how can he turn away from what God has already took as a covenant from the prophets? So Jesus has a collective. Those that follow Jesus, they represent Jesus. They represent what Jesus has left behind. It does not mean that they are doing what Jesus has ordered them to do, but rather it shows that they are people who are doing what allegedly they understood that Jesus has done. And it's very clear that if a messenger came already supporting what Jesus has said, confirming what Jesus has said, those individuals were supposed to work in that new collective. They were, and of course, God has the most ultimate collective. So Israel is part of God's collective. Moses is part of God's collective. God calls Abraham a community. Abraham himself was called a community, which makes it a collective. And within Abraham's community, you have the collective of Israel. But God is telling us here that we are supposed to support that messenger when he comes, because we are following that path of the prophet. But unfortunately, in this day and age, the majority of the world ends up to being deceitful, immoral. They move away from what God has ordered. For them, just like how it was for the pharaohs, it's impossible for God to send somebody after the final messenger that came. Now, I'm not saying that the messengership is sealed, but whoever was the final messenger before here, or the last messenger, it's impossible for God to send someone after him. So when Jesus was sent, the Christians say that nobody's going to be sent after Jesus. When Muhammad was sent, they say that nobody's going to be sent after Muhammad. And there is a verse in where that when they were arguing in regards to Pharaoh and the person who believed during the time of Pharaoh, the man who concealed his faith said to his people, and Joseph came to you in the truth, and you're still in doubt with what Joseph has been sent. And when Joseph passed away, you thought that God will not send anyone else. It is very imperative for God to keep sending male messengers, human messengers, is just because many nations have been removed. And God states that he will not destroy a nation or remove a nation until they get a messenger from their own tongue telling them what they need to do, which then they will deny the messenger. They will either try to kill the messenger or kick the messenger out. The words of God gets fulfilled on that nation and they get removed. How many nations have been removed and how many superpowers are ceasing to exist after the blessed Prophet Muhammad, some of which were from part of the Islamic revolution or the Islamic civilization? The Ottomans, the Abbasids, the Umayyads, all of these superpowers of their times, they all disappeared, especially after they've become apparently and outrightly abusive and ignorant. Now God is telling us, and he's summarizing this page for us, that is there any other religion that you truly want? Is there any other system or law that you want to follow? Is it truly going to matter at the end of the day? Because whatever system that you're going to come up in mind and whatever reality that you see, for example, that you have to walk in the bathroom with your left foot, or you're going to get possessed by a devil, or that if you do not say certain words on your food, that the devil's going to eat with you. All of this is not submission to God, but rather you're submitting to superstitions, and there is no religion at this point. There is no law, there is no system. So if I become a liar when God told me that lying is not accepted from the human being, my life starts to have a negative, it starts to take a negative pathway. I start to have psychological issues that can be studied, that can be repeated, and can be expressed by scientific manners, in a scientific manner, and the cause effect is because of the person being a liar. So these are things that are measurable. And if you choose to take that path, then you are the one who chose that path. And the religion of God already told you, do not be a liar. So the path is very clear and laid out because of how many people trek that path. But if you don't go into a bathroom with your left foot, you go with the right foot, there is no way for you to measure the effects of that on a human being, because the human being does not change. When God tells you to avoid alcohol or do not eat pork, you can measure the effects of what happens to societies when people do break these rules and they do eat or consume or do things that God has told them not to do. You could clearly see the adverse effect. God is here telling us that we do have to believe in messengers, that God can send a messenger at any moment, and that we have to be aware that messengers are being sent. And if you do not believe so, then why would God even give you that mercy in the first place? Messengers being sent is a mercy, and for you, it's not a possibility for your God to be merciful when He's promising you messengers. So why isn't that something that can be tested? When God is telling us the verses in regards to why God sends messengers and the results of nations and superpowers being destroyed, we can clearly see that that happened in history. Now, if you want to go as far in denying that God has sent messengers after the blessed Prophet Muhammad, that is something that you would have to take up with God. But then it's very clear that you are a person where you are making your own whims and desires, and you're making your own decisions rather than understanding what the message of God is. Yes, there are some people that, and I am one of those people, where I do accept the Quran as a messenger as well. The messenger itself here is fulfilling the words on certain people, as God says that the Quran does. God does say that the Quran is a bringer of good news and bringer of warning, Bashiran wa Nadhira. And this is an attribute of the messengers. But we always have to keep our eyes open, because we have to submit to what God has said. God is capable of all things. Everything around you has already submitted to God, willingly or unwillingly. So what is there the fear even when people don't want to submit to God, because they're still under His control? They just not might be able to perceive it. But every decision and every idea that they get and every choice that they wish to take, God has already planned for it. God has already accounted for it, and He has already made the moves against it if there's moves that needs to be made, and He already knows the outcome, because He's the one who judges the outcomes. So this is something that we always have to keep in mind, that when things are not going our way, it does not mean that we are doing something wrong, or that if somebody's getting away with their crime, that they're doing something right, and God is not helping me. In fact, you have to just keep it in the hands of God, persevere, stay, become patient, stay connected to your Lord through your prayers, and you'll see how the time does go and change in your favors. But for me, I thought it was very incredible that God has the capability, has the ability, and has promised us messengers after the blessed Prophet Muhammad. This maybe cleared up a lot of my misconceptions about the religion, and why it's essential for God to keep explaining this book to us, to confirm what the Prophet was sent. Because for every generation, they need somebody to witness against them or witness for them, so that they know that they got the message. God can come to you from any angle, from any field, from any department, from any game, from anywhere. It does not necessitate for a person to be like a prophet and walking through like a prophet. All it is necessary is for you to hear the message that a day of judgment is coming and your Lord is one. So fear and be aware of your God, and adorn your God, and worship your God, and love your God. And with that love that you will receive from God, express it to the world, because it's truly going to make your world a better place, and it's going to make the world of everybody else a better place. And of course, we have to enjoin in good and forbid evil, because that's truly what the message is for you as a believer who believes in one God and understands that there's a day of judgment. And with that said, I truly pray that you guys are enjoying these. All praise to the Lord, Lord of the worlds, and peace be upon you.